If you're anything like me, then you just want to watch the world burn. Wait, hold on. What I meant to say was, if you're anything like me, then you love to see your enemies burn. Okay, that might be a bit dramatic. Either way, the build we're looking at today is all about scorching and igniting as many enemies as possible. Let's get right on into it. As we mentioned, this build is all about burning everything. That's because we're bringing the exotic helmet Dawn Chorus. This allows our Scorch to deal an extra 200% damage and constantly feed back melee ability energy. This is pretty strong in hard content, but it can be a little bit useless in easy content because honestly, it's too strong. So the other reason we're taking Dawn Chorus is because now our Daybreak projectiles deal 90% more damage and they'll cause 30 Scorch, but we'll also bring Ember of Ashes to increase the amount of Scorch from all sources. This is generally good for this build, but the big thing is that this means our Daybreak projectiles will now deal 40 Scorch per hit, and that means that they'll cause an ignition on 3 hits instead of 4, giving us even more damage. So let's briefly cover what abilities and aspects pair well with this build. As we mentioned, we're taking the Daybreak super, and with the recent buff to roaming supers, this is now very easy to get back after you use it. So for the class ability in easy content, Phoenix Dive is the best option since it gives you a burst of health and has a shorter cooldown. Though I find in harder content, Healing Rift is a bit more reliable and better for your teammates. And the same goes for your melee. In easy content, Incinerator Snap is better at causing an ignition, but in harder content, Celestial Fire gives you more range and is a safer option. And as for the grenade, I'm taking that Healing Grenade. This is not only going to give you a burst of health, but when paired with our first aspect, it also gives you Restoration ×2. And that first aspect is Touch of Flame. This gives benefits to many solar grenades, but for our purposes, it's making our Healing Grenade provide an extra stack of Cure and Restoration, and this will be huge for staying alive. The second aspect I like with this build is Helion. Now, whenever we use our class ability, we'll create a solar buddy, and this solar buddy has many benefits, mainly adding in more passive damage, which will pair back into our exotic and fragments. And speaking of fragments, the first fragment we're taking is Ember of Ashes, which is going to give most sources of Scorch damage an extra 50% stacks. As we mentioned, this is huge for our super, but it also applies to weapons with Incandescent, our solar buddy, and even our melee ability. And remember, Scorch is dealing more damage and feeds back melee energy, so we want to cause as much Scorch as possible, which is why I'm also taking Ember of Singeing. Now whenever we Scorch a target, we gain an extra 400% class ability regen rate. We're constantly scorching targets, so this means more healing rifts and in turn more solar buddies. Then I like to take Ember of Torches. Now our melee ability hits will give us and nearby allies radiant for an extra 25% weapon damage. This helps take our build to the next level and is one of the main reasons why it's so good in high level content. For the last fragment, you have two options. The main one that I like to take is Ember of Empyrean, so that solar weapon or ability kills will extend our restoration and radiant. I find this to be a bit more reliable, though if you're running with a squad, you can swap this one out for Ember of Benevolence. That way, all of your abilities and even heal clip weapons will proc a 400% ability regeneration rate for all of your abilities. I absolutely love this fragment, but when you play solo or with teammates that are constantly running away, it's basically useless. And if you want to be useful, why don't you take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button? Okay, done? Let's get right back into it. So what does this look like in action? Well, the main thing is to start by throwing your healing grenade. That way you can proc that restoration ×2. I like to do this when I know that I can immediately get a solar kill to keep it active. You can then use your melee and healing rift at will to constantly stay radiant for more weapon damage and keep that solar buddy active. With Ember of Empyrean, our solar buddy and solar weapon kills will keep up that restoration and radiant. You can then choose to use your super on a large group of enemies to quickly wipe them out and create orbs for your team. Or you can save it for a boss if you're close to that DPS phase. And going into a DPS phase, I like to hold my healing grenade in case I get low on health. I first like to pop my rift to create that solar buddy. Then ideally you'd use your melee to go radiant and then shoot your dragon's breath and immediately pop that Daybreak super. That way you'll have your solar buddy and rocket dealing passive DPS while you're spamming those sword projectiles. So let's talk about ways to improve the build. First up, for our stats, I like to shoot for 100 in resilience and discipline. Then I'm aiming for a mix of recovery and strength. That way way I can have a high uptime on our grenade for more restoration, but I'll still have a decent cooldown for both your melee and your rift. And when it comes to those armor mods, for the helmet, I first like to take a solar siphon mod to help create a ton of orbs. We will be using 2 solar weapons, so this will help get back your super quicker and keep up your weapon damage from our later mods. Then I bring hands on, making our melee kills give a bit more super energy. In team content, you can swap this out for heavy ammo scout to help create heavy ammo for them too, because the final mod that I'm bringing is heavy ammo finder. That way we can generate more overall heavy ammo bricks. Next up for the gauntlet mods, I'm first bringing impact induction, so that powered melee hits will give a bit of grenade energy. Our melee regenerates pretty quick with all of the scorch damage that we'll be dealing, so this helps get our grenade back more often too. Then I bring harmonic loader and harmonic dexterity. That way our solar weapons will have increased reload speed and swap speed, which helps in both normal play but also in DPS phases. And for those chest mods, we want to bring 3 resistance mods. I like to bring a concussive dampener paired with 2 elemental resistances, but the most important thing is that you want to match your resistances to the activity or the threat that's present. And moving on to the leg mods, I like to bring 2 solar weapon surges to boost our solar weapon damage by another 17%. And with radiant, this means our weapons will deal a total of 46% more damage. I then like to bring a harmonic scavenger so that we can get more ammo for our solar weapons when collecting ammo bricks. Since this always rounds up, it's huge for weapons with low ammo counts like rockets. That way it'll just give you an extra rocket with each brick. And as for the class mods, I'm bringing bomber so that whenever we use our class ability, we gain back a little bit more grenade energy. Then I bring reaper so that after we use our class ability, our next weapon kill will spawn an orb. And then finally, I bring powerful attraction. Now we collect any nearby orbs by using our class ability. And that brings us to the artifact perks. Since this season isn't really about solar, there's not a ton you can do. But if you are bringing a grenade launcher, then you can take concussive reload. That way, when you break a shield, hit a champion, or hit a boss, you'll weaken them, making them take an extra 15% damage. And in easy content, I also like to bring the thick of it. Now, when getting 3 kills while surrounded, you gain armor charge to keep your weapon surge active for longer. And finally, you can bring curative orbs. This not only makes it so that you'll create an orb the first time you break an enemy shield, but you can also boost it with a tonic. That way, all those orbs and fire sprites you'll be making will also give you a bit of health. And finally, that brings us to our weapons. In the kinetic slot, I love to bring a backup DPS weapon or a utility weapon. Lost Signal is a stasis area denial grenade launcher, which excels at offering more passive DPS and even taking an advantage of those artifact perks. Or you can bring a chill clip weapon like Tanisha's Mastery, giving you another way to stun both overload and unstoppable champions. Though if you plan on running a special weapon in the energy slot, a kinetic weapon like Blast Furnace is a pretty good option for dealing damage both at range and close up. For the energy slot, I prefer to bring a solar primary, though we do have an option for a solar special weapon. For all weapons, you want to have incandescent. That way you can cause more scorch to synergize with your build. For primary weapons, you have a ton of options. Adhortive or Nullify are both good pulse rifles that can also roll with heal clip for more survivability. Alternatively, you could bring a special weapon like a Baron Action, which is a rocket assisted sidearm and can also roll with heal clip and incandescent. And finally, in that heavy slot, the best option is Dragon's Breath. This helps scorch more enemies and cause more ignitions, and it also reloads quicker when you cause ignitions, so your solar buddy will help get you back to that 5 stacks pretty quick. But you could alternatively take a burst DPS weapon like Parasite, especially if you're running activities like Onslaught or Contest of Elders, since there's a ton of mini bosses to face, though I do still prefer Dragon's Breath for a build like this one. Well, there you have it, Guardians. I just covered a build that creates a ton of ignitions, deals a ton of boss DPS, and even gives you a ton of survivability with healing rifts and restoration. But if you want to see a hunter build that has even more synergies, then go check out this video here. But remember, mastering this build is only the beginning. Experiment with different combinations and tweak your loadout to suit your playstyle. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed seeing a new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment down below on what you might change or how you'd improve the unlimited explosions build. Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech, signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.